Thank you all. It's been a very interesting day with excellent talks in different topics, and I have a challenge to wrap these things up. I'm not sure whether I manage. I will talk from the social psychology perspective, from my field, and I have basically 4 themes that I will touch upon when I push the right button. So first of all, I will talk about the social media revolution. In general, this has been touched in some issues, that it's been a rapid process with the development of social media applications and how we learn to use social media in the first place. Then there's the issue of rise of cyber hate. That is the unfortunate thing, and disinformation or spread of disinformation is part of this package. Fourth part is highly important, is the human vulnerability to cognitive bias, and especially important theme in the world that is increasingly complex and full of different types of information. And fourth point touches the need for transparency in science and technology in general. If we think about what has happened in past 15 years or so, as a social psychologist, I would call this a revolution. So we are actually wired on offline, face-to-face interaction, and we have had to learn to use social media and communicate online, and I feel that sometimes this development has been too fast. So we are living in this kind of fast new world. Many actions are very impulsive. Social media is very affective, both positive and negative emotions. Also, the use of social media is very addictive as well. And it is very rewarding. So there is this self-centered element of people seeking for self-verification, self-enhancement, and also social bonding. So basically, social media is fulfilling a lot of our basic needs. For example, need for relatedness and other types of needs. But it's mostly very emotional, and this has nothing to do with facts or accurate information. It's mostly based on individual tendencies. It's also made our world very small, so we are connected to each other, and no matter how peculiar one's interests are, you will find always someone who is like-minded or who have similar thoughts. Sometimes this is a good thing, sometimes not so good. For example, if your interests are, for example, terrorist motivations or something very harmful. So people do bond up. They seek for similar-minded others, and this might also narrow their perspectives. And definitely group formation takes place online. It takes place, of course, in everyday life, but it's particularly easy online, and the algorithms of platforms help this thing. When I've studied cyber hate now for something like 15 years, more or less. When we started, I thought that this is a highly marginal topic. I studied marginal topics before, and I thought that this is yet another marginal topic for me, but it's been really unfortunate to see, on the basis of our survey data, cross-national survey data, the actual rise of cyber hate. This is no news to anyone, but it's something that, as a researcher, I didn't believe that we are at this point that we have been in a couple of years, where we are basically in the situations like we heard already today, that also journalists, politicians, academics are threatened in social media. Also, if you think about the workers in general in our society, for example, cyberbullying, for example, is quite widely spread. This is a global challenge, but there is variation between countries, and some countries are more tight in their legislations or put more effort on solving even the cyber cases. Important thing is also that this really impacts our subjective well-being. It impacts our trust, both institutional trust and generalized trust on others, and it has a very negative effect on our society in general. So, because trust, for example, is one of the cornerstones of the working society in general. I will just show very briefly numbers. These are very simple results from our latest survey. So basically saying that half of the adult population in these 6 countries witness on monthly basis cyber hate. Almost 1/5 of them, 20%, close to become victimized by it, and then there is smaller percentage of those who actually admit that they have written offending comments to others. These are the results we have gained. So the Finland peaks in exposure to cyber hate. This has been in all of our surveys starting from 10 years ago, when we find that Finland is actually close to US in these circumstances. So that's one part. Maybe our Finns are more also knowledgeable on certain issues, but it's true that we have a lot of problems to solve also within Finnish society. Human vulnerability to bias. So biases, prejudices, and preconceptions affect thinking. And I particularly like to work by Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner, on these things. He talks about fast and slow thinking. So when I was describing the social media use, it's often this kind of emotional, very reflexive, fast thinking instead of being slow thinking when we would actually rationalize things. But Kahneman was one of the key authors writing about how people make biases in their thinking. Confirmation bias being one of them, for example, favoring information that is confirming existing beliefs, attitudes, and opinions. So if you go online, you will find different opinions, but you might take only those that suit your perspective. Affinity bias is the other important one, that we tend to favor information from people who are similar to us. We've done quite a lot of investigations on online bubbles or identity bubbles, so how people self-identify others online, how they seek for companies or other similar-minded, and how they rely on people from their closed circles online. And there's a way to measure it, and I particularly find information bias part of our scale interesting for this event. So I was looking at our newest data, this cross-national data from 6 countries, and tendency for information bias. So who has tendency for information bias in social media? You find younger age relevant. No surprise there, so peer groups are more important for young people. Excessive social media use is particularly important. Out of the platforms, it's actually so that Facebook use peaks there. These people tend to be technologically related, so they use technological tools to be related with others. And they also have a desire for verification for their personal self via social media. So there's no big surprises here in the sense that it's actually the very active social media users who have their own bubble in social media and tend to then highly rely on information that they get from their own bubble. Of course, this will narrow and bias their worldview a bit. About the trust, institutional trust was not significant, but people who had tendency for information bias in social media showed high trust on people met only online, no surprise there as well. But they had also high trust on social media science. So like Google or Facebook or nowadays Meta, for example. So this is of course nice for social media science, but maybe less nice if we try to avoid also spread of misinformation in our societies. They have also lower trust on people in general. So high trust in people met online, low trust in people in general, at least when you model this phenomenon. This is important, as we have heard today, that it's increasingly complex world. There is an excessive amount of information and research data currently available. When we had the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, there was a lot of different experts talking about the phenomenon, and sometimes it feels that every citizen wanted to be an expert on the issue, and this is quite typical of our current age, that there is a lot of information available, a lot of research data, and you can always pick the sources. In higher education, where I'm involved, even in the top levels, I think there is a lot of pressure on verifying the relevance of and accuracy of scientific information even. So this actually requires reading skills. So it's not really enough that you have high media literature in general, but you would have to have also skills to understand that what kind of information is actually accurate. And within scientific world, there is increasing demand for transparency, and there's actually good progress towards that side. But then there's the other side of the recent discussions have been, like ChatGPT was mentioned here earlier on, that AI solutions, for example, that raise a lot of questions. So far there has been worry in media that students will write their essays by using these ones, but I've been wondering the misinformation side of the AI solutions. So how are these systems trained, what kind of biases they might involve, and how reliable are their data sources? And if you use, let's say, ChatGPT, you don't get any kind of references or any kind of sources where it has taken the facts. So if you are competent enough, you can assess the information, but it sets the bar quite high on the people who might be using these systems. So there is certainly a need for transparency, and as we heard already in the previous talk, the EU's role generally in these issues is quite active, and it's also active in transparency of AIs. My last point relates to the responsibility of major technology companies. So it's good that recently there has been also some positive developments, but on the first place, we have ended this situation because for a long time big social media science, usually American companies, typically said that they are only technology companies and they are not responsible on the information spread in their platforms. Of course, this has changed now and quite a bit, but still there are a lot of problems with some platforms. Platforms by Meta, for example, are not open for research, and if, let's say, Twitter is shutting down, so there is less possibility for research to actually look into what's going on in these platforms. So we need basically everyone, including the companies, to solve these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atte Oksanen, for giving an insight into the future. Can you tell us what is the most scaring vision into the future you have met in your research?
Well, I've studied a lot of scary things, so...
Yes, so you're not scared.
Including terrorism.
Well, actually, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, but I think this kind of anti-democratic process that has been going on, and also as an academics, that there is so much this kind of general harassment and hate taking place within the public discussions currently, that because at least in Nordic countries and Finland we tend to trust is the cornerstone of our society, and
especially in the science.
Yeah, so that's if there are a lot of intergroup conflicts within the society, that's very harmful for us all, because I think we still have to believe that we are in the same boat and we are not in the same road that has happened in some other countries.
Any question from the public or the audience? No questions. The last question to you, any advice you want to give to our audience after this day?
But our audience is they are experts in their field, so
yes.
It's like I mean, I learned a lot, so I can't give you any advices.
Thank you.
Maybe only one is that don't use the ChatGPT or don't trust everything that is written there. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Atte Oksanen. Thank you.